The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Manny Malhotra. He nearly helped the Canucks win the Stanley Cup once, and it looks like he's still determined to help the Canucks reach that goal.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also a Canucks writer currently with a Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into the show, we got to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks because it is your Canucks every damn day. And we're not here without you and you tuning in, and we're not here without those sponsors, baby. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. A happy April Fool's Day today, and I wish it was an April Fool's joke that my co-host Kyle Bowen giving up on Locked On Canucks and giving up on these Vancouver Canucks. Because, man, oh man, there are reasons for optimism. We touched on it yesterday, and let's dive into some more optimism, and that is Manny Malhotra absolutely crushing it on his first year on the job with the Abbotsford Canucks. I mean, man, oh man, you look at this team right now, and even heading into the season, they were kind of projected to be a middle-of-the-pack group, right? You weren't exactly sure what you were going to get from guys like Jonathan Lekermacki, DPD, even a guy like Danila Klimovich, a second-round pick from 2021. It just hasn't worked out there. And this Abbotsford Canucks team was relatively young heading into the season as well. But Manny Malhotra, he has crushed it on his first job with the Vancouver Canucks. So that's what I want to dive into here today. I plan on being joined by Brandon Astle. The guy's got the enthusiasm in the booth, the play-by-play man for the Abbotsford Canucks. He should be joining here in a few moments. But I do want to get into, first and foremost, the job that Manny Malhotra has done this season. Because you look at the Canucks roster, and there have been a couple of nights where you've had as much as 1/3 of the Canucks roster having spent time down in Abbotsford this season. And look, I mean, we saw it on this road trip recently too. The line of Nils Amon, Linus Karlsson, and Jonathan Lekermacki. Again, a line at one point for the Abbotsford Canucks was a line recently for the Vancouver Canucks in the NHL. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, you pessimist. You know, if there was no injuries, the Canucks wouldn't have to be in that position. But you know what? It's a testament not only to Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford and their staff for bringing in the right pieces, re-signing the right pieces in some cases as well, but for finding a guy in Manny Malhotra to bring the best out of each and every player on that roster. And I think one of the biggest examples of Manny Malhotra's influence comes with a guy like Aatu Räty, who recently on the Canucks road trip had 3 goals in 4 games. And again, he might not be spending much more time down in the AHL aside from that upcoming playoff push. Now, speaking of the upcoming playoff push for the Abbotsford Canucks, I'm happy to be joined by Brandon Astle, bringing the enthusiasm in the booth for the Abbotsford Canucks on a nightly basis. Brandon, thanks for joining the show. How are you doing today, bud?
Thanks for having me on, Trevor. Excited to be here to talk some Abby Canucks.
Oh, it's nice to hear that voice on the podcast here, man. Again, you're one of the most enthusiastic play-by-play guys I've heard out there, man. It's if I do miss an Abbotsford Canucks game live, I love tuning into the highlights and hearing your enthusiasm behind the booth. You've had a lot to cheer about this season, and especially recently on this 9-game winning streak for the Abbotsford Canucks. What has impressed you most of late about these Abbotsford Canucks for winning 9 in a row, despite having a handful of guys up with the Vancouver Canucks in the NHL?
Yeah, I'd say, Trevor, just their ability of finding ways to win, especially in tight games. Excluding last weekend in San Jose where they beat the Barracuda back-to-back, identical 5-1 scores. They had that in the bag before the games were even like 15 minutes old. It was just wild how they started those games. But before that, they had a couple overtime wins. They had a shootout victory against Calgary. They had a 1-0 regulation win the next night against Calgary. A 2-1 game against Bakersfield. 5-4 against San Jose earlier in March. So In playoffs, obviously, not a lot separates two teams, especially in a short series. It's going to be a best of three in the first round if the Canucks don't get that first round bye. So they're almost have adapted that playoff mentality mindset where they're finding ways, grinding out victories, which is obviously very encouraging before they head into postseason. And just in every facet of their game right now, like defensively, they're locked in. They've given up just 2 goals, like I mentioned, over their last 2 games. The offense is firing on all cylinders, and considering the guys that they're missing that's in Vancouver right now, it's been quite impressive.
It's been incredibly impressive, and there's a lot of guys who deserve credit for it, but the guy I'm giving the most credit to right now is Manny Malhotra. I mean, this guy I mentioned off the top, he almost helped the Canucks win the Stanley Cup, and I think he's still determined to help the Canucks reach that goal because it's really impressive to see so many guys come up from the Vancouver Canucks this season and make an impact at the NHL level. Brandon, in your eyes, from a guy who's watched every game this season, what's been the primary reason for Malhotra's success with this team?
Obviously, it's an experienced guy playing almost 1,000 games in the NHL, someone who's been there, done that. He's won a Calder Cup in the AHL early on in his playing career, and now getting his first ever head coaching gig after spending the last 7 years as an assistant in both Vancouver and Toronto's NHL teams. And starting in the AHL, I'm sure was a bit of an eye-opener because there's a lot going on, a lot of movement on a day-to-day in the AHL. So I'm sure he had to kind of drink out of a fire hose, if you will, early on and adapt to his new surroundings. And this is a guy that wants to be a head coach eventually, right? He's not coming down to the AHL to go back to the NHL as an assistant, right? So he's earning his stripes just like the players are. And what he's done since day one is lay the foundation and really get every one of the players, no matter if it's a first-round pick or a player on an amateur tryout. He wants everybody to buy into the systems and the structure that him and his staff have put in place. He's very process-driven. You hear him say that word process a ton. He's never wavered on it the entire way, and it's all paying off in spades because the players have definitely bought into what him and his staff have been preaching. The team's great defensively, which obviously should be a huge surprise just by the way Manny played in the NHL, a really reliable defensive center. And you can see just so much improvement in a lot of areas in various players' games, whether it's a forward or defenseman. He just has rubbed off on these guys incredibly well. And another thing I appreciate is the accountability that he's brought into this year. We've seen a couple times he's scratched some high-end veterans, not just for 1 or 2 games, but for several games, several weeks. They sat in the press box, and they have some pretty impressive resumes. But at the same time, it wasn't like he just stashing them there and not talking to them, because I've talked to the players that he scratched. Obviously, they're not happy with the decision, but he still had a positive mindset and some good things to say about Manny and how he's approached the situation, where he's keeping them in the loop, communicating why they're sitting out, what they need to do to get back into the lineup on a consistent basis. And those players, give them credit. They put their nose to the grindstone, worked hard, and they've been regulars ever since. So just super impressed with what Manny's accomplished in just his first year.
Yeah, and Brandon, maybe for listeners who don't know, who are some of the veterans down in Abbotsford that got scratched this season?
Well, early on, it was Christian Wolanin, where just a few years ago, he was the AHL Defenseman of the Year. One of the best. He is the best defenseman in Abbotsford Canucks history, and didn't get off to a great start. Was in and out of the lineup, saw himself in the press box for a long period of time. And to his credit, like I mentioned, kept a very positive attitude, had some great things to say about Manny and the conversations he had with him. And when he got back in the lineup, I believe in November, he hasn't come out since, and he's been one of the best defensemen since that. So he's been one. Phil Giuseppe, since coming back down, had a hard time getting into the lineup, but now he's back and a full-timer again. Danila Klimovich, throughout his 4-year tenure in Abbotsford, he's been in and out of the lineup. And this year, he's having his best season yet. And it still didn't really matter. Some things were kind of lacking in his game, especially away from the puck. And Manny sat him down for a bit, right? Gave him a little bit of a reset. And ever since coming back several weeks ago, he's been the best goal scorer on the team. And his game has really rounded into form defensively and away from the puck. So it just goes to show, you got to be on your toes. You can't get too comfortable in the lineup because you never know what's around the corner. And seeing these high-end players sit out, I'm sure it really caught the younger guys' attention. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you got to love a guy, too, as a rookie head coach, like we've talked about, being willing to scratch a guy in Christian Wolanin, who was the AHL Defenseman of the Year not that long ago. I mean, Manny Malhotra, he's got some big cojones, that's for sure. And, Brandon, I did want to get your thoughts on this. And again, you listen to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. Who has benefited the most from Manny Malhotra this season? Because I feel like there's a lot of candidates there.
Yeah, you're right, Trevor. There's a lot of guys to pick from. I guess first and foremost, just seeing what he's doing in Vancouver right now is Aatu Ratu. And Aatu could be a guy like Malhotra was in the NHL. A really reliable 200-foot player, very good in the faceoff circle. You see Rick Tocchet using Aatu a lot in big faceoff situations in the NHL, and obviously Manny's doing the same thing when Aatu's been in Abbotsford. That's something that he takes a lot of pride in, is being good in the dots. And obviously Aatu is a skilled forward, but he knows in order to make the National Hockey League on a full-time basis, he had to come back down to Abbotsford and really focus on the defensive game and those parts, because if he does get back to Vancouver like we're seeing now, he's not going to fit into the top six. He's going to be a bottom six forward that's going to be relied upon to help out in his own zone, be strong on the faceoff dots, win battles, right? Not play a ton of minutes, but really make an impact on the defensive side of the puck. And we're seeing it now. It's leading to offense. I've seen this all year in Abbotsford. Guys are really taking pride in their own zone. And since they're doing that, it's leading to opportunities the other way, whether it's odd man rushes or whatnot. It's the puck's ending up in the opposition's net because the Canucks have been so great defensively, especially of late during this 9-game winning streak. So Aatu is definitely someone who's benefited from Manny's tutelage. Someone else who's gotten really strong away from the puck has been Max Sasson. He came in as really like an offensive type center, but this year his defensive game has really taken off due to the teaching of Manny Malhotra. He's played on the wing a little bit more, which is great for his NHL career, hopefully, that he has, because he can play either wing or center, where the last couple seasons he was strictly just a centerman. So that versatility will help his case and maybe becoming a full-timer with Vancouver. So the list goes on and on. But those two guys, just thinking a centerman like Manny was, they have benefited a ton from him.
Yeah, 100%. And it makes sense. A guy who was a very successful NHL center throughout his career, rubbing off on the centers first and foremost. And I do think the Aatu Ratu comparison to Manny Malhotra is an interesting one, right? Because both of these guys were very highly touted prospects, right? Manny Malhotra being a 7th overall selection. Aatu Ratu at one point, people thought he might have been a 1st overall pick. And maybe both of those guys, still early days for Aatu Ratu, but maybe both those guys didn't and won't hit the offensive ceilings that some thought they did, but they can still be useful players at the NHL level. And man, oh man, Aatu Ratu with his creativity on the faceoffs, the hockey IQ, which you've seen all season long, both defensively and on the power play in Abbotsford too. I think he's had an impact there as well. Really like the synergy going on between Manny Malhotra and Aatu Ratu specifically. Brandon, if you got a couple more minutes, I do want to keep you around for a few more Abbotsford Canucks related questions. Going to pause for a quick break here. You listen to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. We'll be back on the other side after showing it our friends over at Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where the heck did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, it isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. And I went, what the heck's going on, man? It's dieting season, okay? I don't want to get the dad bod. And now, thanks to Monarch Money, I budget smarter and save more. And unless you're blowing all your money on Abbotsford Canucks tickets, make sure that you stop the spending and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year, baby. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every damn day. Pleased to be joined by Brandon Astle, the man in the booth for the Abbotsford Canucks, doing the play-by-play. And Brandon, maybe just a bit about you, my man. How did you get into the broadcasting game?
Well, just like every Canadian kid growing up, Trevor, I wanted to be in the NHL as a player, did the whole street hockey thing. And while we're playing in my cul-de-sac with my neighbors, I started commenting on some of my teammates in opposition a little bit. And I guess, got a lot of laughs and got encouraged to, I guess, do more play-by-play as we were playing street hockey. And then really kind of focus on the guys talking while an NHL game was happening, like Jim Robson, Jim Houston, John Shorthouse. And I thought, that is a pretty sweet gig. How do you get into this type of thing? And then just really kind of did some research. And as I got older and older, realized how much more I wanted to do it. Played a little bit of junior, still had some eligibility left, but left out on the table to start my broadcasting career. Went to school downtown Vancouver at Columbia. And then got my first gig while I was going to school, junior B lacrosse with the Coquitlam Adanacs, which was a big eye-opener and pretty much just like a boxing fest at times, but was able to cut my teeth there. And then as soon as I graduated, didn't really have a gig. And then all of a sudden an opportunity came up with the Langley Chiefs, like the day I wrote my exam, and ended up getting the play-by-play job there with Harvey Smeal and the Langley Chiefs in the BCHL, and eventually worked my way up to the Abbotsford Heat. Unfortunately, only stayed a year with them before they moved. The Calgary Flames packed up their farm team and moved to Glens Falls, New York. And then I kind of bounced around a little bit, did a lot of lacrosse with the Vancouver Stealth, the Vancouver Warriors, New Westminster Salmon Bellies, did a bunch of Hockey Canada tournaments to stay on the hockey scene. And then, wasn't the play-by-play voice from day one in Abbotsford, but halfway through that year, I ended up getting the full-time gig. And now all of a sudden we're almost wrapping up year 4. It's been quite the ride.
Yeah, there you go. And happy for you that you got back in calling some AHL games there. I mean, the Abbotsford Heat, that was a flash in the pan, and for you to keep grinding and keep doing your thing. And like I said, man, you definitely bring the energy in the booth for the Abbotsford Canucks. The locals are, they're treated to your voice in their ears, my man. And it's been an exciting season as well for the Abbotsford Canucks. Again, Canucks fans, you got to be paying more attention to the Abbotsford Canucks, because those Vancouver Canucks, the playoff odds are all but gone. But those Abbotsford Canucks, they do seem playoff bound. And maybe quickly before I want to dive into a couple other players, it sounds like a DPD, Elias Pettersson, won't be eligible for the Calder Cup playoffs. Am I correct on that? Are you a little surprised that he didn't get sent back down for his AHL playoff eligibility?
Well, it came down to a numbers thing, Trevor. So the Canucks had to make a decision between sending him or Mancini down. I'm sure they wanted to send both to Abbotsford to get that playoff experience. But at the same time, they had to keep a minimum amount of players on the Vancouver roster. So they couldn't just make all these transactions all at once on deadline day. And the rule is you got to send your players down, at least from a paper perspective, if they want to be eligible for the AHL Calder Cup playoffs. So they were only just able to send 3 down and pick Shelovs, Lecker, Mackey, and Mancini. So, unfortunately, we won't see DP in the AHL playoffs. Enjoy seeing him here these next couple of weeks. Hopefully, they get into the playoffs in the NHL. We'll see what happens. Obviously, we'll need some luck on their side, but I'm pretty sure I've called his last games in the AHL. He's just been that fantastic in Vancouver, and definitely has a bright future ahead.
Yeah, a ton of fun to watch down there with the Abbotsford Canucks. And even for me watching him down there, I didn't quite see him having the impact that he's had at the NHL level. But, I think one thing is his speed has really stood out. And he's, again, just a really smart, cerebral heads-up player. And I've kind of compared him to, Alex Edler in the sense that he might be, more physical and less offensively productive. But just a hell of a player down there. Now, of course, there'll be a couple other young guys you will see down there for the Calder Cup playoffs. And specifically one is Jonathan Lecker-Mackey. Maybe talk a bit about his season and what do you think his ceiling is at the NHL level?
Yeah, he's been fantastic. And I think a big part of his development was him joining Abbotsford last year when his season was over in Sweden. Came down for a couple of weeks, got some games in, and kind of got himself adjusted to the organization and the style of play in North America and in the American Hockey League. Unfortunately, didn't get him in any playoff action because if you remember, he went back to Sweden to prepare for training camp for the Worlds that he was hoping to crack Team Sweden. Unfortunately, didn't make that team. But I think he went back to Sweden in the offseason and really knew what to work on, add some strength, some speed, and whatever else. And he came into training camp and it's just been lights out ever since and has been a go-to player when he's been in Abbotsford for offense. He plays the point on the power play. He's usually on the top line. And you kind of wonder, someone with like his size and inexperience on the North American ice, how would it translate at the first couple of weeks, the first month of the season in the AHL, because it's a tough league to kind of get up to speed with, but he has just been fantastic, especially on the defensive side. He really surprised me on that part, and the ability to kind of break out of his own zone, win board battles. That's obviously a huge part for a winger if they want to be successful in the NHL. You look at someone like Brock Besser, he's elite at winning battles on that right side, and Lekker-Mackey definitely held his own when going up against bigger guys along the walls and the corners in front of the net. Like, everybody knows about the shot, and rightfully so. He's got a laser, but he has scored a bunch of his goals this year, Trevor, in front of the net. Deflections, rebounds, taking punishment in the back, cross checks. Like, he's okay getting to the dirty areas and willing to go for those loose pucks if they do score it out to him into the crease or in the slot. So he's obviously still young and rounding out his overall game, just 20 years old, and seeing like what he's doing at the NHL level. Hasn't really blinked, to be honest with you. He's shown it an incredible amount of poise. He's been great on the power play. And I think just as time goes on here and he gets more and more comfortable in his own skin, I think he's going to be a very, very good goal scorer in the NHL. And just as like a comparable, like, not putting a lot of pressure on him, I hate to do this to guys, but like, what about like Cole Caulfield? Could he turn into Cole Caulfield? Another guy that was picked 15th overall in the first round. Another guy that's smaller in stature. He's actually 3 inches shorter than Lekker-Mackey, but just a bit heavier. Just a pure goal scorer. And every year, Cole Caulfield's getting better and better, and now he's going to be sniffing 40 goals this year. I think that would be a great player to kind of mold his game after, and kind of see what happens from there. But I'm thinking we're going to see a guy that's going to be stalwart in the top 6 on the first line on the right wing, and maybe even the point of the power play, like him and Quinn Hughes snapping it on a 5-on-4 or 5-on-3. You got Hughes with the playmaking ability and Lekker-Mackey with that shot. He's going to score a lot of goals for this franchise, man.
I love that comparison, eh? Jonathan Lekker-Mackey being the next Cole Caulfield. And, a lot of Canuck fans know that Cole Caulfield's a guy the Canucks probably should have taken back in 2019 when they took Vasily Podkolzin. Obviously, Boldy, and Matthew Boldy and Cole Caulfield were the 2 guys that they did pass on in order to get Podkolzin. But there's some similarities in their game, man. I do really like that comparison. Brandon, I'll ask you 2 questions here to kind of wrap up here, and appreciate you taking some time to join us on Locked On Canucks. Who would you say has been the Abbotsford Canucks MVP so far this season? And then who would you say has been the unsung hero for the Abbotsford Canucks?
Ooh, MVP this season. That's a tough one. There's just a lot of candidates that have been having a great season for the Abbotsford Canucks. MVP, I would say Linus Karlsson, although he hasn't played in as many games as someone like Aatu Ratu or Arshdeep Bains. But Karlsson, just every game, you know what you're getting from him. He's going to be a guy that's going to be willing to stand in front of the net, take punishment, fish out pucks in the corner. He's so heavy on his stick, as Canucks fans are starting to see now that he's playing in Vancouver on a consistent basis. He's got such a great scoring touch around the net. He's not going to blow you away with his speed or shot, but what he does do very well is he's a puck hound. He retrieves pucks in his own end, in the offensive zone as well. He's a sneaky, solid playmaker to boot, to go with the scoring touch. And just the overall consistency that he brings to the lineup on a night-to-night basis is something that obviously is a luxury to have for Manny Malhotra. And he's someone that got his trust right away. Like, Manny has some great things to say about Linus, and just didn't really know how strong on a stick he is and how tough he is to win battles against. And that kind of stuff translates well into the NHL like we've seen these past few games. So has he played enough games to win MVP? You can argue the case, but he's over a point per game. He's the all-time Abbotsford Canucks leading goal scorer and point getter as well. So it's great to see him get that 1-year extension and a one-way deal. And I think it's really starting to solidify himself as a regular option for next year in Vancouver, I hope.
Yeah, 100%. And 21 goals in 30 games for Linus Karlsson. And I think he surprised some people at the NHL level as well. A bit quiet during his recalls last season, but this year, again, that willingness to go to the net and, cause a ruckus, for lack of a better term, has been noticeable at the NHL level so far this season. And then, Brandon, quickly before you go, any unsung heroes or maybe Abby Canucks that don't get enough love that you want to shout out for having a pretty stellar season so far?
So I got a couple. I'll name a forward and a defenseman. If he didn't make the All-Star game, I would have said Ty Mueller, the rookie. He's just been fantastic since day one. So I don't know if you can call someone an unsung hero if they're an AHL All-Star. So I'll push him to the side for now. Up front, I know it's a guy that doesn't get a lot of headlines, and probably because he's not an NHL deal. It's Stanley Cup winner Sammy Blais. What he's brought to the lineup has been so valuable, especially for the younger guys. Like, they can just see someone in the flesh that's been there, done that. He's played in a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals and has a Stanley Cup ring. I mean, these types of guys do not grow on trees to help the young guys move up the ladder and develop, right? And he's just such a great professional, works hard in practice, and it's translating to games. His poise of the puck, like, you can just tell, like, this guy is an NHLer. Unfortunately, he's on an AHL deal. Hopefully next year he can get back to the National Hockey League. I'm hoping with Vancouver. I know the guys down in Abbotsford have just loved him. He's been on a tear lately as well, 10 points over his last 7 games. He's a big body that works hard. He's got a great scoring touch, and he's still got a lot of passion for the game. I've spoken to him a couple times this year. I'm like, what are you still doing here? Like, what motivates you? And he says, I want to get back to the NHL. He's won a world championship. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's still hungry for more, which is something that I'm really happy to see him still have that drive and hunger to get back to the NHL. But for now, he's really liking this leadership type approach he's taken in Abbotsford, and I think he's going to be a big player for them come playoff time. Someone who's played in the AHL a lot and in NHL in a playoff type atmosphere. Like, nothing's going to rattle this guy. And then on defense, someone who Canucks fans should know a little bit, since when he left college, he joined Vancouver on the blue line right away, and that was Cole McWard. Just a steady guy, does a lot of things well. I don't know what his best asset is because he does so many things very, very good. He's a good skater. He moves the puck. He's got a great offensive tool set. He's solid defensively. He's on the power play. He's on the penalty kill. And I guess just kind of right now he's stuck in that log jam. The Canucks all of a sudden have a lot of defensive prospects, but he's a right-handed shot. Like, Pettersson's a lefty. But then you got Verlander and Mancini who are righties. So it's obviously might be a bit tougher for him to get a look, but he's having a career year down in Abbotsford. Most goals he's ever scored, most points he's racked up. And like I said, he's just like a calming influence. It's hard to believe he's just in his second year in the American Hockey League. I think he's got NHL potential written all over him, and I hope it's with Vancouver soon.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think those are just a couple of great guys to shout out there. And, Cole McWard, he did get a recall back in December, didn't get into the lineup, but he has been a steady guy down there for the Abbotsford Canucks. Speaking of steady, Brandon, you are steady in the booth. You were steady on this show. I do got one question from a listener that maybe you can answer. Is this guy a former Creston Valley Thundercat? The name looks familiar. Brandon, can you confirm? Yes. I think I know the answer. You got the Elite Prospects page, buddy.
Lanky 32, that's me, man, in the flesh. Had a great time there. I got traded there in November. I started my junior career at Beaver Valley. Got blindsided with a trade to Creston Valley, which is just about an hour or so down the road from Beaver Valley. And I actually wasn't going to go there. I said, I'm going home. Like, I know nothing about Creston Valley. I'm going to try to go back home and play junior B. But I got a call from the head coach, Shane Luckenchuck, who ended up being the MVP of the KIJHL, Patrick O'Sullivan. He's a goaltender. I got traded for him, ended up winning MVP. So they ended up winning the trade, but we had a deeper playoff run in Creston Valley, played in a Game 7 triple OT in the first round, which is a highlight of my career, and then went to the second round for the first time in Thundercats history, and is definitely a team that I still keep tabs on. I only played there for half a year, but like I said, I hung it up to become a broadcaster, but there is still a little voice in the back of my head that thought, man, maybe I should have went back to Creston. Who knows? Maybe I'd be in the NHL right now, Trevor. Who knows?
Maybe. But Brandon, your impact's still big. People pulling out the Creston Valley Thundercat reference, man. What a team name. What an appearance here on Locked On Canucks. Brandon, keep doing your thing for the Abbotsford Canucks. And hey, maybe these Abbotsford Canucks can go on a long run, and we'll get you back on here on Locked On Canucks. But appreciate your time here on Locked On Canucks today, buddy.
No worries. Anytime. Thanks for having me on, Trevor.
No problem. That was Brandon Astle, play-by-play man for the Abbotsford Canucks. Going to pause for a quick break here and then wrap up the show on the other side. You're listening to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. We'll be back after shouting at our friends over at Wonderful Pistachios. There's nothing that I love more than talking about my nuts. But the thing I love talking about more than my nuts is we're talking about Wonderful Pistachios, baby. Because this is the snack that's both delicious and nutritious. Make sure you crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, baby. And I know right now, Kyle Bowen, he's out there just mowing wonderful pistachios, going to the gym again, trying to forget about everything Vancouver Canucks. Kyle Bowen, come back, you mother. Anyways, wonderful pistachios. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Personally, I love those naked nuts, so give me the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost. These snacks are always my go-to. And if you like the teas, the in-shell options are also a classic favorite. Whatever wonderful pistachios you have, naked nuts or in shell, make sure you get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every damn day. And Brandon Astle, what an appearance here on Locked On Canucks. Again, I've been a fan of that guy in the play-by-play booth, man. I like the guys that bring the energy. You know, those monotone guys that speak like they belong in the MLB. None of that, man. Give me a guy like Brandon Astle every day of the weekend. Canucks fans, this is something to cheer for, not just for this season, but for the years ahead with this Vancouver Canucks team, man. Look, I got to shout it out one more time. I mean, Patrick Alvin, Jim Rutherford, this management group has done a good job of bringing in guys, both on the amateur side and the pro side, to create a good farm system for the Abbotsford Canucks. You know, bringing in a guy like Archie Baines or a guy like Sammy Blaze, you know, re-signing a guy like Linus Karlsson, Ty Mueller looking like a potential steal at fourth overall of the 4th round of the draft. Of course, Kirill Kudryavtsev, another defenseman picked in the 7th round as well. So there's a lot to like about the bones and the structure and the foundation of this Canucks team. And maybe one other question I'll throw out to you listening right now before we get out of here on Locked On Canucks. Manny Malhotra, based on the job he's done as a head coach of the Abbotsford Canucks this season, is he a potential head coach for the Vancouver Canucks in the future as well? Of course, I do think that is a couple of years away, but look, much like Travis Green when he was down there doing good things for the Utica Comets, you could see that, you know, head coaching was in his future at the NHL level, and he got a good run here in Vancouver. Of course, he was hamstrung by a pretty brutal management team, but Travis Green obviously showed that he had the chops to coach the NHL level, and I think Manny Malhotra is going to show the same thing, and he has shown the same thing this season. And look, one of the things that he said recently in an interview was that, you know, he has gone to the point with this roster where the players are coaching themselves, right? And I do think the new school coach has to have that blend of, you know, being firm, not hard on guys where you're yelling and cursing and throwing stuff a la Mike Keenan or John Tortorella or whatever, but be firm with your guys, but also trust them to make the right decisions on the ice. And one guy Manny Malhotra shouted out recently was Chase Waters, the captain of the Abbotsford Canucks, and his ability to lead and play anywhere in the lineup. You know, coaches can't just rule with an iron fist like Mike Keenan tried to do back in the day. They do have to be relatable. They do have to trust their players. But Manny Malhotra also comes from a background of knowing how to play defense as well. And again, one of the things he talked about, and for those kind of wondering about maybe the Canucks structure versus the Abbotsford Canucks structure, is that, you know, Manny Malhotra and Rick Tocchet, Manny Malhotra said he was told to have 80% of his structure mimic what Rick Tocchet and the Vancouver Canucks are doing, and 20% there he has his own flexibility. But they do look pretty similar overall, right? I mean, the AHL in general is just more of a grinded out kind of league, but Manny Malhotra has done a great job with the Vancouver Canucks, or the Abbotsford Canucks. Hey, that's a Freudian slip, baby, because Manny Malhotra, let's call it right now, the head coach of Vancouver Canucks, starting in 2027-28. What? That was another episode of Locked On Canucks. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what we're doing, go subscribe and like on YouTube. On the podcast side, go follow us and leave a 5-star review. I keep saying we, but I got no Kyle Bowen anymore. But Kyle Bowen, come on. He set the foundation here on Locked On Canucks. And also the founder, Nick Bondi, set the foundation too, man. Come on. It's not just an I thing. It is we, baby. And we are not here without you tuning in. So appreciate the hell out of you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks. But for now, I got to get out of here. Again, I'm Trevor Beggs, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.